All right, let's take a moment to talk about assembly. Once you get to this particular point, these are pieces I grabbed out of the cabinet, so they could use a little more sanding on a couple pieces, but these will at least serve the purpose for our discussion here with the assembly. Now that I have my 4 15.5s, I have my 4 9s. Remember, I don't need my 11s for the assembly until later. I can go ahead and talk about kind of an assembly. We just went over figuring out our dowel rod, right? Our 9-inch dowel rod and our 4 1.5-inch dowel pins or pegs. And now we can talk about assembly. This is probably the most difficult part for students to kind of understand because we kind of think a certain way. Now, when we assemble this, the first thing students want to assume or think is that we put all of the pieces onto the dowel rod. So they want to do something like this, where they put all of the pieces onto the dowel all at one time. So it looks something like this, where and then all of the pieces are like this. And that's not how you do this, okay? If you remember how the stool moves, it can't all move on one axis like this. And so what actually is happening here is we actually have these pieces are separate, and the only pieces that are actually on the actual 9-inch dowel are these pieces here. Now, one thing you'll have to understand here is that, if I put it this way, maybe a little bit better to understand, are these pieces down here at the bottom, okay? And so what we need to make sure they do is, another thing students often do is they think, well, one has to be this way, and then we need to have the opposite on the other side. And that's not really the case. We need to make sure that the inside ones match each other and the outside ones match each other. So, for example, we have inside that are pointed down, and we have outside ones that are pointed upward. So this would be correct. This would be incorrect, where we would have something like this, where the inside ones are opposite and the outside ones are opposite. That is incorrect. We want the insides to match, and we want the outsides to match, like this. So I'm going to move these ones away right now and say the first thing we want to do is to create something that looks like this. So we actually want these to go on here. Now, these may go on really easy, and they may go on really, really hard. Now, what we want is we want them to go on fairly snug. All right, so what we have is 2 inside pieces, which is going to house part of our seat. The 2 legs are here are pointing in one direction, so this time they're both up, which is good. And then we're going to have a peg into here and a peg into this side. Okay, like this. The last thing we want to do is force anything in there. So what we're going to do here is we can have these kind of tap them in. But if we're forcing them in and we're really pounding these in there, what we don't want is we don't want these to split out. So we got to be a little careful in making sure that we're not pounding them too hard. All right. So now we have these ones here, we have two pointing upward. We have two pegs in, and we're gonna take this peg and put it on this one, but we need to make sure it's opposite. So this way would be both being up. We want one to go up and one to go down. So we're gonna put that like this. This is exactly what we don't want it for it to split. Now that was right on that knot right there, and this is a project that I found, so I'm not too worried about it. So we want to make sure that we don't do that. But this will work fine for what we're trying to accomplish. It shows you a really good example of why we don't want to force them together. This one, same thing, we want it opposite on this side. So here, this one's going to go in a little better. Like that. And now we put pegs on the outside here again. Now we think we have these put back together. I wanted to show you kind of what I see students often do and how they mix this up. This is correct. Notice there's one up and one down. We have small, large, large, small, and then we have small, large, large, small. But notice this one is pointing in the same direction. So this one is incorrect. We often do this, and then students get all done and they're ready to put it together, and then they open up their stool and they have one side where it fits nice on the table, and then the other side they have something that looks like this. So this would be incorrect. So what we want to do is match this side. So if you notice, we have two on this one are both pointed slanted downward. So this one on the outside here needs to be pointed in the same direction as the outside one here. So if I slide this on here like this, and then re-put this back here on the outside, this is what we want. Now, we want insides pointing in one direction and the outsides pointing in one direction. So then we go ahead and open this up. We have them sitting here. We have this piece here, this here, here, and then here like this. When we collapse it down, when we actually glue the top on, we're actually going to do the same thing. We're going to make sure that we have the insides will go on one board, and then the outsides will go on the opposite side of the outside board. And that's how we're going to put it together. We'll kind of use that as a guide later on when we do this and put this together. All right, that's the assembly for your legs and your dowel rod piece.